Recent reports of sexual harassment in LSU's athletic department and how they were handled in the past could mean big changes in the future if they aren't reported properly. This proposed law has the backing of the governor, and Danny Monteverdi has all the details on it from the state capitol in Baton Rouge.
Some state lawmakers said today they were frustrated after another hearing about sexual harassment allegations at LSU. They say suspensions handed down to 2 employees were not severe enough. Now, a bill that will be debated during the upcoming legislative session could result in firings if similar actions happen in the future.
Members of the Select Committee on Women and Children invited 9 high-ranking LSU officials, including head coach Ed Ogeron, to testify. But after the university was served with state and federal lawsuits from Associate Athletic Director Sharon Lewis, LSU attorney Winston DeQueer said it would not be okay to have employees testify before the committee. Several of the lawmakers say it wasn't enough that 2 LSU Athletics Department employees were only suspended after a recent report about how the university handled reports of sexual harassment within the athletic department. That could soon change. House Bill 409 by State Representative Amy Freeman would make it a fireable offense to know about, but not properly report, something such as sexual harassment on a college campus. Governor John Bel Edwards says he supports that bill.
Nobody is beyond reach. We don't have people anywhere in Louisiana who are irreplaceable. Nobody is untouchable. So wherever the facts lead, that's where they need to go.
We'll keep you updated on the status of this bill as it makes its way through the legislature. Reporting at the state capitol, Danny Monteverdi, Eyewitness News.